Hello, I'm Bruce Baumgarten, Director of Mission at St. Joseph Catholic Community. For so many of us, maybe for all of us, this could be the strangest, most surreal Holy Week and Easter in our experience. While it seems counterintuitive to celebrate the sacred Paschal Triduum without gathering for these special liturgies, we are nevertheless still called to enter into the mysteries which these 3 days celebrate, even bereft of the liturgies themselves. Perhaps we are being called this year to more fully acknowledge the Paschal mystery in the life of Jesus and in ourselves. The reflections which follow originated in two different presentations. One was an overview of the liturgical reality of the Triduum, and the second was an extended reflection on the Paschal mystery, thoughts I began sharing years ago, first in youth ministry and then with adults. So the outline is simple. After this introduction, orientation, we'll spend a brief time on the liturgical season of the Triduum and its ritual celebrations. But apropos of the circumstances we face this year, we'll shortly segue into a reflection on what each of those days calls us to. A spirituality of Holy Thursday, a spirituality of Good Friday, and a spirituality of Easter. I say a spirituality because these are simply my reflections, based on my experience and the theological training I've received. But they are not the only way to view these things, just a way. Now, all of these are but different aspects of the same reality. Those two words I've used a couple times now, Paschal mystery. When I was a child or young person, I don't think I ever heard those two words. My experience of church and Catholic school seemed to cover everything but, and some of those things we covered could actually be peripheral to the core of our faith. But this most central reality, Paschal mystery, was unspoken. By definition, the term simply means Passover, and specifically the passing through death to resurrection as experienced by Jesus first, and by all who would seek to live the way. It is, in fact, the cornerstone of evangelization, what is termed the kerygma, or what we are called to proclaim and herald, that we are saved through the death and resurrection of Jesus. Coincidentally, I believe Paschal mystery is one of the parts of our faith which most resonate with our human experience. I have not directly heard many choirs of angels or seen heaven for myself, but I know the experience of expending oneself in love only to have that cost something, sometimes deeply and painfully, but nevertheless finding that when entered into with trust in the love of God, a new life can arise. Perhaps that is why my teenage self, like many others, felt so alienated from this faith. It seemed so pie in the sky to me. Stories of first-century fishermen and apparitions of a Blessed Mother, facts and minutiae to memorize. But while my adolescent self was hurting in some deep and serious ways, no one shared the good news that our God cared so much for me that he literally became human and suffered also more deeply than I ever could. And in that experience, passed through the dark curtain of death to a life completely new. And as an adult, I find, especially as a parent, that pattern of Paschal faith has been repeated over and over again. The end is not darkness and death, but light and life. However, Easter can only occur by going through Holy Thursday and Good Friday. And so it makes sense to take it step by step. Let's look at the liturgical days first. A 3-day season, all its own. So briefly, Lent ends on the evening of Holy Thursday and the beginning of the Mass of the Lord's Supper. That's when Lent ends. The sacred Paschal Triduum, beginning then, is the peak, the crescendo, the pinnacle, the highlight of the liturgical year. Why is it called 3 days when Holy Thursday to Easter Sunday is 4 days on the calendar? Well, liturgical days are modeled on the Jewish tradition of sunset to sunset. So the Triduum is 3 days because Holy Thursday evening, which begins with the evening Mass of the Lord's Supper, to Good Friday evening is 1 day. Good Friday evening to Holy Saturday evening is the 2nd day. And Holy Saturday evening, which begins Easter with the Easter Vigil, through Easter evening is the 3rd day. The usual liturgies of Holy Week are different in a way that highlights the unity of the mystery being celebrated. Though Holy Thursday and the Easter Vigil have elements that are different from normal Masses, and Good Friday is a liturgy all its own, there is also a sense that they are different parts of a larger whole, a single liturgy celebrating the Paschal mystery of Jesus. The simplest ritual element of that is how each liturgy begins and ends. See, the evening Mass of the Lord's Supper on Holy Thursday has no formal ending or dismissal. Instead, the liturgy usually moves from the church to a chapel of reposition with the transfer of the Blessed Sacrament, and people disperse after private prayer. The celebration of the Passion of the Lord has no formal greeting to begin the liturgy. Instead, the ministers enter the sanctuary and lie prostrate in prayer. This liturgy also ends with no formal conclusion or dismissal. And the Easter Vigil usually has no formal greeting or entrance. Instead, the community simply gathers around the new fire, and the liturgy begins with a prayer and the rites associated with the fire and the preparation of the Easter candle. But at the conclusion of the Easter Vigil, the final dismissal returns with enhanced glory when we add alleluias to both the deacon's dismissal and the congregation's response. This is very important and actually symbolic of a deep reality. All the Triduum liturgies are celebrations of the complete Paschal mystery, the self-giving death and resurrection of the Lord. They are not some type of allegory or performance for each separate event of the mystery. For example, we don't celebrate the evening Mass of the Lord's Supper as if Jesus had not already gone to his death and resurrection. We don't celebrate Good Friday as if Jesus had not already risen and we had not already been baptized into his Spirit. No, we celebrate the entire Paschal Triduum in the knowledge that we have already been saved by the Lord's passage from death to new life. Now, unfortunately, this year the liturgies will be altered to account for the lack of congregational participation. So not all of the usual Triduum rites will take place. But I think of the refrain from the Passover Seder, "Next year in Jerusalem." For us, we pray, "Next year in the church." In part 2, we will begin examining a spirituality of each day. So I hope this little overview or orientation has been helpful. But let's go into that more personal side, the spirituality, in our next part. Thank you for being with us.